Everyone thinks they know his life. They've seen the photos, the horses, the poems, the fearless smile. But there is one question the world keeps asking quietly. Who is Fazza's wife? Not just the name written on paper, but the woman who lives in the silence of his story. And to understand that, you must first understand something about royal love. Royal love is never simple. It is negotiated, calculated, and often delayed. From the outside it looks like choice. From the inside it feels like obedience. He grew up knowing that one day, his life would not belong only to him. It would belong to a crown, a future, a responsibility far larger than the heart of a single man. And yet, his heart learned how to love long before his destiny allowed it. Long before the world began asking questions, there was someone he loved in silence. Not a public figure. Not a name meant for headlines. Just a presence that made him feel human. Not royal. She knew him without the title, without the weight, without the expectations. With her, he wasn't the future ruler. He was just a man who laughed freely and wrote poetry without restraint. And that was dangerous, because in royal life, love without permission is a risk. When the time came for duty, it came without negotiation. A decision made above emotion. A marriage chosen for stability, not desire. For lineage, not longing. He did not refuse, because refusing would have meant challenging everything he was raised to protect. So he did what royal sons are trained to do. He obeyed. The marriage was announced. The world celebrated. Questions followed. But behind palace walls, the truth was heavier. He entered that marriage with respect, but not with his heart. And the woman he married sensed it. Not immediately, but slowly. Love has a way of revealing absence. They lived together in formality, in courtesy, in dignity, but not in intimacy. And when the truth finally surfaced, that his heart still belonged elsewhere, everything changed. Not with scandal, not with noise, with separation. Quiet, unspoken, final. The woman he truly loved disappeared from public view, from the palace, from his daily life. Not because love ended, but because love could not survive inside that structure. And for the first time he experienced what royalty rarely allows its heirs to feel. Loss. He turned to poetry. Because when a prince cannot speak, he writes. Lines filled with longing, with absence, with the ache of choosing duty over desire. To the world they were beautiful verses. To him they were confessions. Time passed. The palace moved forward. Responsibilities increased. Expectations tightened. And then came a moment that shifted everything. A loss that changed the balance of power. A reminder that the future was no longer distant. Stability became urgent. And with that urgency came pressure. He was reminded of his role, of what was expected, of what could not be delayed any longer. Royal families do not ask if you are ready. They decide when you must be. So once again he stood between heart and duty. And once again, duty won. The woman he loved left. Not because she stopped loving him, but because staying would have meant living in shadow. And love does not survive where it must hide forever. She became the quiet chapter no one was allowed to read. The world noticed changes. A smile that didn't reach the eyes. Appearances without warmth. Poems that felt heavier than before. People speculated, but no one truly knew. Because royal pain is never explained. It is endured. So who is Fazza's wife? The answer depends on how you define the word. Is it the woman chosen by tradition? The one bound by responsibility and position? Or is it the woman who held his heart before the crown claimed it? Royal love does not always end in fairy tales. Sometimes it ends in sacrifice. Sometimes. Today the palace stands. The future continues. Children grow. And stability exists. With or without romance. Because royal life values continuity more than passion. But if you listen carefully, if you read between the lines of his words, you will understand something important. Not every love story is meant to be lived openly. Some are meant to be carried quietly. So when people ask, who is Fazza's wife? They are really asking something deeper. Who did duty choose? And who did his heart never stop choosing? That is the royal love story the world was never meant to fully see. There is something the palace never teaches its heirs. How to grieve quietly. Because royal grief is not allowed to slow the machine. It is expected to exist without interruption, without explanation, without pause. And so, when that chapter of his life closed, he did what he had been trained to do since childhood. He carried on. From the outside, life looked unchanged. Appearances continued. Responsibilities increased. The crown moved closer. But inside, something had shifted permanently. Because once you love freely, even briefly, you never forget what freedom feels like. And that memory becomes dangerous. People often misunderstand silence. They assume silence means peace. That silence means acceptance. But sometimes silence is just survival. And that was his silence. He stopped correcting the rumors. Stopped clarifying the questions. Stopped trying to explain a story the world would never fully understand. Because how do you explain a life where love must step aside for legacy? How do you explain that the heart does not follow protocol? The woman the world calls his wife exists within structure, within duty, within continuity. She represents stability. And stability in royal life is not optional. It is everything. But the woman his heart once chose existed outside all of that. Outside permission. Outside strategy. She knew him before the crown demanded his silence. And that is why her absence echoes louder than presence ever could. This is the part people rarely accept. Royal marriages are not always about romance. They are about alignment. About alliances that protect the future. About decisions that prevent chaos. And while those decisions may be correct for the institution, they are often devastating for the individual. He was never cruel. He never pretended love where it did not exist. He never turned pain into spectacle. He endured. And endurance is often mistaken for indifference. There were moments he almost spoke. Moments he considered explaining everything. But explanation would have changed nothing. And exposed everyone. So he chose restraint. Because sometimes silence is the last act of protection left. If you read his poetry closely, you'll notice something. He never writes about betrayal. He never writes about anger. He writes about distance. About longing. About a love that exists without touch. Those are not words of a man who stopped loving. They are words of a man who learned how to carry love without a future. Time passed. Children arrived. Life stabilized. And the world assumed the story was complete. But some stories don't end. They simply stop being told. So when people ask again and again, who is Fazza's wife? What they are really asking is this: did love ever win? And the answer is complicated. Love won once briefly, before duty reclaimed its place. Love existed deeply, even if it was not allowed to remain. And sometimes that is the most honest version of love there is. Royal life does not destroy love, confines it. It reshapes it into memory, poetry, and silence. And those things last far longer than headlines. So the next time you see his smile, remember this. Behind that calm expression is a man who learned early that some loves are not meant to be lived openly, only honored privately. This is not a tragedy. It is a royal truth. That not every crown is worn by choice. Not every marriage begins with love. And not every love story is meant to be finished. And maybe that is why the question never disappears. Because the story was never meant to be simple. Who is Fazza's wife? She is the woman chosen by duty. And she is also the woman remembered by the heart. Both exist. And that is the full royal love story.